Kyle, thanks for joining me. It is great to be here with you and to learn a little more. As a former software developer myself, I'm sure we will geek out on that a bit. But Kyle Shevlin, good to have you here. Tell us about Agathist. Give us a quick intro to the business.
Hi, thanks, Karl, for it's a pleasure to be here. Agathist is a software development agency. Our little tagline is good software by good people. My goal is, as someone who's kind of developed a high level of expertise in front-end development, specifically in React and React Native, is my hope is to help find clients that, need web or mobile apps built in those, and they want them built really well. I mean, who doesn't want a well-built app? And then, to some degree, we offer team augmentation, or one area I'd really love to get more into is like code-based rescuing, like refactoring, like helping people who have lost all velocity in their ability to build. How can I help fix that problem for them?
Yeah. And you started the business relatively recently, right? Within the last few months?
Yeah, we opened in March. I say we, I have one colleague with me. Her name is also Kyle. We joked about calling the business Two Kyles, Too Furious, but we didn't take that too seriously. I've had the name Agathist in the back of my back pocket since 2017. I first bought the website back then. Devs, we're always buying websites before we build something. And I learned that Istanbul has the top level domain of IST. So I was able to buy agath.ist, and I just thought that was the coolest thing.
It's a cool name, and I love short domains that are like single words. That's always like, I as a dev myself, I have always been out there buying too many of those things, and there's a ton of them sitting in my account that I'm never going to do anything with.
Eating away
I should just let
$100 a
them
year.
go. I know, yeah, it's stupid. All right, so tell me what Agathist is. We were talking about this before. It is an actual word, and I did not know this word. So continue.
Sure. So Agathist comes from the Greek word agathos, which means good or like the good. And an agathist is one who believes the universe trends towards like ultimate goodness. It can have some odd connotations in that, but the way I take it is that an agathist is different than an optimist. An optimist thinks they're just trying to find the best out of what's going on right now, like silver linings, glasses half full. An agathist is someone who recognizes the reality of things as they are, but determines to make things better, right? To do the work to achieve the good. And so to me, that just really fit kind of my mindset. I have that like, the hiking mindset of like leave things better than you found them, or the boy, I don't know what group it is, but I've had that my whole life. Just step into a project, you try and make it better. And I was like, this just fits really well with what I would like to do as an agency owner, is to like make things better, make things good. And so I just thought it was a really good name. You get lucky sometimes.
I think it is a good name. I mean, like I said, it's short. It's, once you remember that is a word, and it is a word, it's a very easy word to say and remember. So you got something there. Now, whether that makes your company successful or not, we will check in on.
Yeah, names aren't everything, right?
Right. I know. I as somebody who owns a company called The Podcast Consultant, which is the most boring but descriptive name of what we do.
SEO might be really good though.
Right. Yeah. So you were freelancing a bit before this. So tell me about like why go from freelancer and soloist to partnering up with someone, and then presumably, as you guys grow, building an agency and all that, because it's a totally different thing. And I'm sure you've thought about that, the trade-offs there. Why make that shift though?
Sure. I'm going to make a quick correction. I have freelanced in the past, but just prior to this, I was working for a company. So I've I've worked for several companies over the course of I think I've been doing this 12 years now. And there have been some periods of freelancing, which kind of inspired me to think, maybe I can step that up a notch and go from just being like a solo consultant to someone who can take on multiple clients, who can lead some engineers or some teams together, and let's see what we can build. So kind of the process of getting to this place where I decided to finally start Agathist kind of comes down to, I was working for a health startup, and I just really wasn't enjoying my work at all. Not in a technical sense. There were some technical things that were interesting, but for the most part, I was struggling to keep my interest up in what we were doing. It just, the product wasn't really meaningful to me. And, those kinds of things happen. Like it's capitalism. Not everyone works on things that they absolutely love. And I totally get that. But as someone who has ADHD, I'm on the autism spectrum, I have ADHD, interest really does matter. And I think we don't take that quite seriously enough with people who have ADHD, because when someone with that tells you like, hey, I'm not interested in that thing, what they're really telling you is like, I will not have the dopamine levels enough to focus on it unless you pile a bunch of urgency on top of it. So things that essentially stress you out so much you could finally take action, right? And I think a lot of people can relate to that period, like whether you're neurodivergent or not. But I kind of realized like, if I'm gonna keep being a dev, then changing it so that I can pursue projects that I'm really interested in is really meaningful to me and what I would like to do with my life. So,
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. And it brings up a dichotomy that gets mentioned a lot in advice for people just starting their business. And on one school of thought, on one hand, you've got this school of thought that says you should start a business because it's going to be like where the market demands it, where there's profit, where there's money to make, right? And then the other school of thought is start something you're passionate about. Now, of course, ideally you want maybe both. Like one or the other is probably the false dichotomy. But I do think it's interesting when people say that advice of go find something where there's money and go capture a market. That sounds great in theory, but it only takes you so far, right? Like I'm kind of similar in that I would get bored pretty quickly if the only draw to the business was making more money, because at some point you just start like what am I like? I don't know. I want freedom. I want time. I want to do things I enjoy with people I care about. That's actually ends up being more important, I think, for a lot of entrepreneurs than just pure money. Now, of course, money is an enabler to do those things, so that it is absolutely essential to this journey, I think. So I'd be curious to get your thoughts on that. It sounds like you saw a little bit of that, like that fork in the road. If I can go make money as a dev, or I can go kind of pick my own path and do things, just projects that I'm really passionate about. How did you think about that, and where's that kind of taking you with Agathist today?
yeah, I mean, that's very true. To be honest, I have never been someone very motivated by money. I'm not really extrinsically motivated. I'm mostly intrinsically motivated. And frankly, for people who know neurodivergence really well, I have a lot of pathological demand avoidance, which means like you can put a big carrot in front of me and I just don't care. It won't really change how I behave or how I think about a goal. And so that's honestly a bit interesting itself, just running a business, because perhaps a client comes to me and they're giving me a lot of attitude and they just think they can throw some money around to make me act a certain way. And, sorry, I'm not, the homo economicus of, rational economic
Right.
behavior. So, but that said, I still think there's more than enough work out there to be done. And there's more than enough like cool projects out there to be done that I think this can work out. And so far, we're doing all right. Like I've found a couple projects so far that have, not balked at the price we've set, which, I think is a reasonable price, but some people might think it's a little expensive. But it's one of those weird behavioral psychology things where it's like you charge more, people respect you more. It's so
Yeah,
weird.
absolutely.
It
Yeah,
never
yeah,
makes
yeah.
sense to my brain, but whatever. But yeah, I'm just not personally deeply motivated by money. I'm totally with you in that money is an enabler. It's definitely helped me with a lot of problems in my life, and I'm so thankful to have been part of an industry that boomed when it did and kind of getting lucky that way. But at the end of the day, what I'm really trying to find is like, I want a balance of like, how do I work? Like I'm talking like the hours or like how intensely I'm working on stuff, or a balance with like I said, projects that interest me, even just working with cool people, having some control over like who I subcontract with or not. for people who watch this, I'm wearing a golf hat. I play a lot of golf. I want to have the freedom in the summer to go play the tournaments I play because I'm still competitive without really having to explain to my boss all the time, like, hey, I need PTO for 4 days
Right.
here and stuff. I want to be in a little more control of that. So there's a lot of appeal to doing this.
Oh yeah. I think I in my experience talking to entrepreneurs, like that the biggest appeal is often freedom instead over money. And again, money essential enabler. We all need a certain amount of it. We live in a society that requires it. It is what it is. And not to say that we don't want to make more, we don't want to do better, we don't want to buy a nicer house someday, right? There's all these things we care about. But just thinking like on a day-to-day level, honestly, the thing that gets me excited to come in and run a small business is the fact that I get to set my own path most days. And, I plan ahead. So I've always got like my whole week ahead and locked in, and I don't go off, take random days off, but I block a day every so often to just go do something fun. Right. And I'm sure you get, the same kind of thing. So tell me a little bit, when it comes to getting started, those first couple customers, this is always one of those questions where people want to, there's a million pieces of advice you'll find on the internet. How did you think you were going to get your first couple customers? And then what actually happened? Because I love to hear if there's a difference or if they actually all aligned and it all worked perfectly.
Oh, it definitely hasn't worked perfectly. To be honest, I'll probably be keying in and listening to your other guests in this series just to pick whatever tips I can. But I'll be honest, I kind of came into this with a little naivete of the first time I freelanced was probably in a time in the market where it was a lot hotter, and I have a somewhat substantial Twitter following. So I was able to just say, hey, I'm available. Anyone want to take me on for some freelance? And I had more work than I could deal with, like, back then. And so a part of me kind of went into this like, hey, maybe magic will strike twice. How we've actually landed our clients so far have been through referrals only, which I hear is pretty common. So I'm not stressed about it. Like, I'm like, oh no, my form on my website isn't convert now. But yeah, I have a pretty good network of people who are very skilled devs who, just run into a bunch of people, and they knew I started Agathist. I sent out like a newsletter back in March to almost 1,000 people that I have subscribed to. And I was like, hey, I'm starting this. If you know anyone, send them my way. And a buddy of mine here in town, just a local that I know well, was like, hey, this one company is starting an app. They need front end expertise to build out tons of stuff. It was a lot. And I was like, okay. And you know what? Sure enough, within a week, we landed them. My conversion rate, at least, is pretty good. And then the other one was kind of similar. I have a mutual on Twitter who couldn't continue to do their contracting with this company. They needed, and they were in a pinch. They had 3 weeks to launch a web and a mobile app, and they're like, we need someone to come in who doesn't need any hand holding. And I've kind of described that as like, that's kind of what we can do. Like, we're just experts at this. You can put the code base in our lap and tell us what you need. It'll get done, and so, yeah, that's how we've done it so far. And I'm going to continue to kind of work that ground of like, keep tilling the soil, trying to get referrals or whatever, But I would love to get to a place where maybe even our former clients are referring us for us, or like repeat business with them, stuff like that. So,
yeah, I mean, almost every small agency I've known getting started, and this was certainly true for me with Draft.dev, starting that 5 years ago. All my early clients were my personal network, people that knew me or knew of me through somebody. Just very, it was 1 degree of separation at most, almost all referrals. And I think the reason it makes sense, right? Because going and partnering up with an agency or working with them on a project it takes a lot of trust. And I would say, especially the kind of work you do, Kyle, like in writing code that is going to go into production and serve real users and make money or not make money for the business, like super essential that they trust you personally, and at the end of the day, they know you're not going to screw them over or do shoddy work or whatever. So I think it makes sense that it should be referrals in the early days. I don't see how you'd even have some kind of other other channel until you've gotten enough referrals to maybe like build yourself a base and get some some testimonials and start to build trust, in other ways. But so I think it's good.
I think the only thing I'd add to that is like maybe if you're lucky enough to work in a niche where your competition sees who built their awesome site. Like my first job was for an agency actually here in Portland. Shout them out. Fine. They would take on a customer in an industry, and for example, we had customers in the wine industry, and you see one wine brand site come out be really awesome. The next ones are like, hey, we need an awesome site too. So maybe you can get lucky in that kind of regard where like you become kind of the known agency in a certain niche or something like that.
Yeah. You had a blog post about this recently, and you kind of touched on some of the points. So I kind of want to dive deeper into this because I think it's very hard to differentiate as a new business. You don't really, you don't know what your unique selling proposition is or who your ideal customer is yet. I mean, I'm sure you're getting an idea and you're starting to get there, but like you wrote a blog post about this, like that I get this difference, and it's kind of like where we are a best fit, right? Is a way I would summarize that blog post. Give me a little bit of the high level of that, because you mentioned one already, which is like we can come in, we're senior level people, we can read a code base and get started quickly. What else like stands out as far as like things you guys can do that maybe a less capable dev agency or something wouldn't do as well?
I kind of want to highlight the post a little bit first in the sense that like I honestly think you can end up writing something like insert your agency name difference every year. And I totally expect it to change. But this was just an exercise somebody told me, like they're like, examine your current clients or the ones you've had and try and identify at least a few things that are common themes among them. And one of them was like no hand holding. Like we come in, we do the job, and I think that's really key. And I think that's why we're worth the money we are, right? Some other ones were, our deep expertise in specifically React and React Native. I've worked for now 3 years, specifically in this world where building like cross-platform components and features and stuff, things that get shared between web and mobile, which is kind of its own niche. There's things you need to know about the differences between the two platforms, even though there's mostly similarities because they're both powered by React. But knowing how to navigate that, especially with new clients who are building new things, everyone wants like a phone app. And then you got to remind them like people go to a website too, and so I think there's something we can really offer there in that we've done this a bunch. We can continue to do it a bunch, and we can continue to share that expertise with you. And you're getting two things for I'm not going to say the price of one, but you're getting two things faster than you might get for paying two separate teams to build them out. Which kind of comes to our third one, which is I think you just get speed. I'm not saying that in the sense of like we're going to work overtime for you and work like our tails off until everything's done at the 11th hour. But when you're hiring people with a high level of expertise who know how not to go down rabbit holes, who know what to what technology to trust, what to be a little more apprehensive about adopting, stuff like that, like you're paying for speed in a way, in the sense of like you're not going to need as many revisions, or if we're augmenting a team, like our pull requests are going to come in pretty solid. You're not going to be spending days arguing with us about trying to get something in. It's going to ship, and we know how to ship quickly, ship iteratively, stuff like that. And so I think when you think about speed, which maybe isn't what some customers are really thinking about, but like they do have deadlines, they do have things they want done. Like, the quality of what gets built really can lead to speed. It's kind of a weird thing. I know they say like you can have something, what 3 things, pick 2, like cheap, fast, and good. But
yeah,
I mean, we're trying to throw out the cheap one and give you fast and good. Yeah. It's kind of the way I think about it.
I think it's smart. And this is something I did early on with draft.dev as well, was kind of wrote sort of this manifesto of what we, what we do well in a way. I don't, the manifesto is a big word. I don't mean to like think it's that grandiose. I like your idea of like hey, let's write it out as what it is today, and then come back to this every year or two and say, what makes us unique now? Because I can tell you from my experience, again, 5 years of running an agency, it's had to change. What we do and what we do well has had to change. And it should, I think, because you discover things about the market and where you tend to do well and the kinds of projects you want to do and the kinds of team you want to build just as you do it. And there's no substitute for just throwing it out there and trying things. Anyway, my only point is to compliment you on actually having written this down and having the structure to do that early on, rather than just kind of making it well, we'll take any project that comes our way and we'll see what we like, and I think you've done a good job of that.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Shifting gears from the customers and finding customers and all that side of things over to the service delivery side, which is the other part of running an agency. I always think of it as like there's two big, sort of pillars to running a good agency. One is you got to get customers, and the other is you got to deliver on the service, and it's got to be great. Well, I guess it should be great. I don't know if it has to be, because there's a lot of agencies that aren't great. But okay, so let's talk about service delivery. You and your partner, I imagine. Well, tell me about how you guys work together. Do you split projects? Like you're on one project and she's on another, or is it going to be more of like you both take key pieces of projects? Like how does it work for y'all?
Yeah. So far, it's kind of been a mix of both. There's been times where, we had both clients, and it really kind of made sense for me to take on one because that's how the relationship with the client had kind of started. And they were already kicking ass on the other one. Sorry if ass is not something I should say, but
you can say ass. That's okay.
But yeah, they were doing really well on it, so we've split that. But other times have been more like kind of you almost become a de facto project leader or a team leader or whatever job title you want to put on. Where I've been like, okay, I'm going to do this, you're going to do that. I'd say one of the great benefits of working on the same project together, though, that I think actually applies to just teams in general. I kind of advise people to do this. It's like getting yourself essentially what I call the PR buddy, like the pull request buddy. So many times people go into workplaces, they like build a feature, they do this thing, and they just shoot it out in the universe, and maybe they pick some reviewers. But let me tell you, if you have someone who they're going to review you and you're going to review them and you're going to do it, you just move so much more quickly because you get in a rhythm about it. One of the benefits of working with Kyle is that we've been friends for like 8-9 years. And so like we already have great communication. And so, we get to work pretty quickly when we're doing stuff like that. And my thought had always been like, I kind of mentioned it. I think there's a lot of work out there to be done. Getting connected to it is a pretty challenging problem, but also in kind of the market we're in right now, where to give context, I'm saying this in July of 2024, like there's been a lot of, layoffs in the last year and a half. There's just so much talent out there that I kind of think to myself, I'm like, wow, maybe I can't hire all you full time. Like I definitely think like with the right project, I've got a big network of friends that I could be like, hey, do you want to subcontract on this project? Let's put your talent in this problem together and let's get it solved, kind of thing.
Yeah, I love that whole having a PR buddy idea and just like the mind meld that happens. I think people outside of programming don't realize how much of a team sport it can be and should be, and what it really gets to be once you're really connected with a team or at least a couple individuals. I remember this at the last job I had with a startup where I was doing dev work. Had an awesome teammate. Shout out to Holly Lambert if she ever listens to this randomly. She's great. And like one of the cool things about working with her is like we got to a point, where within a year or so where like when we kind of knew how each other coded. And sometimes like it makes it faster to review pull requests from each other for sure. And then it also kind of makes it like, hey, I saw you did this over here. I remember you doing a similar pattern over here. Like, have you ever thought about this instead? It's hard to describe this if you haven't written code for a living because it sounds all very like, hey, aren't you just like writing words on a page and then hitting go, And you know how it is, like Kyle, because you care about code quality, and I
do.
Think I did it when I was doing it too. And yeah, so I think it's like it's really fun, and it makes the whole sport of coding a lot more interesting, exciting, fun when you've got somebody who's kind of pairing with you and again knows your brain. So I love that as a way to strengthen your abilities. And imagine again for your clients, the advantage is they're not getting one brain, solely. They're getting a couple brains that are both really good together already. So it's almost like getting a little team. Do you guys envision like building the agency up in that way where you're a little team that can come in and work on projects? Or do you want to have, just individual consultants who get pushed off onto things? I mean, I imagine you're still figuring it out, but like, where do you see it going?
If I could choose the future that I want to have, I definitely would prefer to build like a small team. I'm not overly concerned with growing Agathist to a place where we have, 4 or 5 dev teams working on 5 separate client projects at the same time. I would love to be more of maybe a very small, gosh, even saying 5 to 8 people sounds huge in some ways, but like, yeah, a 5 to 8 person thing that maybe takes on 1 or 2 clients at a time. I don't know if that's possible. It's one of those things where you learn as you're going what really actually works and what doesn't. But that's kind of my vision. Part of like taking on the job of doing like starting a business in this way is also to give myself opportunities to keep learning and growing in ways I wasn't really finding while working at certain places. It's that big challenge and just in life where you get really good at something, so people keep giving you the same thing to be really good at, and which okay, that's great, but there's also times you want to stretch yourself, and so for me, there's still things I want to stretch myself with code wise. There's things I want to stretch myself with in terms of entrepreneurship, business ownership, and frankly, just like being a leader. Like I've been a leader in other capacities in other careers. Even we briefly mentioned before I came on this that I had a podcast called Second Career Devs. So this is my second career, but there's always ways to grow and learn in that regard too. And so, yeah, I don't know. That's my vision. I would love a small team where we're working on like 1 or 2 things. I don't see myself being one of these people who's like, I don't want my title to become CEO of like, I don't know, 50 devs that I don't really know and I'm just farming them out. That doesn't seem as humane as or personal might be a better word that I really want to be.
Yeah. It's interesting you saying all this. It takes me back to, I remember my first year writing a blog post where I was talking about the whole, my whole goal is just to have a small team, to just have them like, to have the freedom and flexibility to work how I want, spend time with my family. And that's going to be it. I'll be happy once I hit that. Right. And I'll just give you the quick preview was I got to that point where I could take a whole month off within like 2 years. And then I was like, okay, well now what do I do? Like, I was like, I want to do more. So it's for your vision. It's good to have a vision, right? Like, I think where you're at, it makes perfect sense. Your vision is let's have a small team. I can expand as a leader, but then you're going to get there at some point, presumably. And you're going to say, okay, yeah. But you're going to say like, is that it? Is that what I wanted? Or do I want to keep going to something bigger and different? Or do I want to even, again, you pass over to your partner and you move on and do something completely different, or you go back the other way. I've met entrepreneurs who have intentionally scaled back down when they got to a point where they didn't like the job or it wasn't what they wanted. And I think it's good to have that self-awareness and just be aware of this is what I really want right now. But then, like you said, be open to learning and the experiences driving you in a bigger direction. And striking that balance there. Now, when it comes to, so have you and Kyle had a chance to hire yet, or is it still just just the 2 of you? Okay.
It's just the 2 of us. And in fact, Kyle is like a 1099 through me. So I asked her when we started, when I was like, hey, I'm going to start this. I'm going to leave my job. I'm going to do this. I asked her, I'm like, would you want to partner? And she specifically said no. That was not like a level of responsibility she really wanted. So, and I totally appreciate it. Like, it's fine. So I currently have 100% of Agathist LLC. I pay her the same rate I pay myself. So like, I feel like that's the fairest thing. She has the same amount of experience as I do, and she's doing a great job. Like I feel like that's the fairest thing I can do at the moment. Now, as I add employees, if I ever get to that point, because that's where I'd really like to get to. I'm hoping a year when we do our follow-up, I'm like, hey, I have enough clientele. I was able to hire her as W-2, give her a good, stuff like that. We'll see where we are. that'll be a whole new thing to learn. I've never had to, have the payroll budgeting kind of thing, where I have to figure out like what is the level I can hire? Can I only hire juniors and I got to train them, stuff like that. That I'm not at that stage yet in this business. We're just so new.
Yeah, and it's a fun transition. I mean, and you'll decide if you want to do it or not. I think again, this is where the beauty of entrepreneurship is so much freedom to like decide, do I want to really hire on a big team and you become essentially a leader and manager and administrator, or do I want to stay small enough that I can be hands-on and still really, get in there and roll my sleeves up.
Yeah. I think right now where we are in the business and just like what I think the people who are getting to know us know of us and like think about us. I think to some degree I'm the business. Like I've had courses on like Egghead and other platforms before that like developed some of my following and some of how people know that I'm good at what I do. I've been managing a blog under kyleshevlin.com for close to a decade. Like people coming to Agathist likely are coming because they know who Kyle Shevlin is. And my hope is that like there's a day where they come because they've heard of Agathist, but that's a long road. That's not going to happen anytime soon. And so to some degree, I guess the point I was trying to make is like taking her on as a subcontractor was not only like great in that regard, and that like we're not going to have to really focus on like what is Agathist different from me to some degree, but also like it's something she wanted. She wants flexibility too. Part of why she is taking on subcontracting is to not be grinding away 40 to 50 hours. Like, we can choose kind of the number of hours and client work we're doing right now, and she gets a lot of flexibility that she wasn't getting to have before. And I think a lot of people like, I mean, if they were truly honest with how many hours in a week that they're actually working or productive, like it'd be so low.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I'm an idealist. I mean, you don't pick a weird philosophical Greek name like Agathist if you're not, but I don't understand kind of why outside of like, there's just things that take time, like busy things that take time, but like creative work, like, man, you can get a lot done in 25 hours a week if you're focused, if you're in the zone, if you're not distracted. And yeah, so I think to some degree, there's a lot of, you can bake that in if you try.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I remember thinking very similar things when we were very small. And I think this is true of very, very small organizations. They're extremely efficient in a way that big organizations can't be, because they have, there's a law in programming about this too, about how like the number of people,
Conway's Law.
Yeah, Conway's Law. Yeah. I knew it's one of us had to pick that up. So Conway's Law, yeah, which says something like the more people you add, essentially, the slower everything goes, because what happens is communication overhead just exponentially increases. So, person A knows what person B is doing, but they can't know what person C, D, and E are doing because they haven't met with them. And then they meet with them. Now they're taking all this time on meetings and reading their updates and all this stuff. It's just inevitable, right? That like, yeah, 9 women for 1 month can't make a baby. 9 programmers, in 1 month don't do the same work as one programmer does 9. It's just the way it works.
It's
And
totally true.
yeah, and I think that's again. So, like back to our small agencies, the advantage you have is you're extremely efficient at this stage where you have 2 people, you already know each other well. Your minds are kind of melded as programmers. You don't have the overhead of sales and marketing because you're just getting referrals and inbound. You don't have overhead of admin stuff because you're just 1099s, simple cash flow stuff. Honestly, like, again, you can be cheaper because of it. You can be like work less hours. You can have more freedom and flexibility. And it's funny that the thought is, oh, I'll be more financially secure and have more freedom if I get bigger. But the reality is you get more and more constrained. And I feel this every day. I feel, man, I have to go meet with like 8 people this week and they're my team. I can't not meet with them. I can't just like ignore them, So it's an ironic thing that happens as you grow, and you have to decide again, do you want to do that or do you want to stay small? Can you stay small? There's risks to that too, but it's a cool, Yeah, it's good to notice that, notice what you do and don't like about it. Because I liked that same phase of like feeling like I could go sit down and work for 4 hours and got so much done, and that was it. That was all the business needed was 4 hours. It's incredible.
Yeah, I think for me, kind of coming back to the fact that I'm ADHD, I can be really prone to burnout. And I have burnt out a few times in my career, and autistic burnout's like a little different. It's not like I go on a vacation, I'll be okay. Um, I won't go into real deep details about it, but like taking control over how often I work or how hard I'm working is kind of really important to my ability long term to continue to do this. And so to some degree, like trying to stay small or like trying to make this work is just, it's honestly just about my own health in a lot of ways too. I'm 39. I have, probably 25-ish more years to work, and I'm kind of look at the market. I'm sure a lot of people do, and I'm just like, okay, how do I make this happen? And I think while I can't predict that far in the future, I'm not even going to try. But right now, I'm like, if I can get enough work as Agathist for a small team for 20 years, like that's good enough for me. I think another side of this that we never talk about is like, it's a superpower to learn how to live cheaper. Like, and I'm
Mm,
not saying being
yeah,
frugal really, but
yeah, yeah,
like if you don't let the hedonic treadmill keep eating
yep,
away your, and I'm not good at, I play golf. I've already admitted, like I play an expensive hobby, but it's like my
right,
only hobby, right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
and so I kind of look at it too as like, okay, I can keep growing. I can start to set goals of like 1 million ARR, 5 million in revenue, or whatever. I don't know all the business terms. I'm still learning them. Um, I could either set these ever growing goals, or I could set a goal that's like, how do I have a comfortable life that still lets me do the things I want to do, and I'm not stressing all the time. And I think for me, choosing less stress is more important. But who knows? Maybe in 10 years, my attitude will be a little different about it.
I think you bring up a really good point, though, and that is avoiding lifestyle creep is a really important thing to be aware of if you want to have more flexibility as an entrepreneur. So there's a way I think about it is if your baseline expense rate, you have to make this amount of money a year to keep your family in their current, state of where they live and how they live is $300,000 or something pretty high. It is going to be much harder for you to go to zero and start a new business, right? Like it's like the reason that I think a lot of people who get fairly successful very early in their careers can never go back and start a company is like that you'd have to take such a hit lifestyle wise to do that. And the kinds of people you hang out with when you make $300,000 a year and you live in a really nice place in a really nice neighborhood and you've got really big schools and nice cars, it's super hard to pull back from all that, remove all your social connections. And I don't even think you should. It's just reality. Like, think about it. You're kind of sucked in. And I talk about this with my wife all the time. Like, there's certain things I just want to make sure we keep ourselves kind of like keep our baseline low enough that if I have a bad year, we're not, we don't feel like a ton of pain around it. And another thing that an entrepreneur I know and look up to a lot has said is like, try to live off of one of you or your spouse's salaries. Now, not realistic for everybody, but like in an ideal world, you could do something like that as an entrepreneur. And that way you could sort of baseline with one of you. And if the other one of you is having a great year, good, you sock away some extra money. And if not, then you've got the ability to kind of fall back. And
No, that's a good point. Like, honestly, part of why I can pursue this is because my wife has a decent job right now. You know, I live in America. I don't know if all your audience will, but health insurance is a big deal here. If she didn't have a job with health insurance, and frankly, it's a good job and decent insurance. It's not as good as what I had
yeah.
before. I did. It's one of those things where you're like, oh shoot, I'd had it really good in this regard.
Right.
But like, if she didn't have that, I can't do this. I can't even try. Because it's just so cost prohibitive to get your own insurance, and maybe you went through that now that you have multiple agencies, and you probably have. Yeah.
Same thing. My experience is the same, Kyle. Like, I couldn't have gotten the first one off the ground without my wife. We, even now, we still lean on her insurance because it's better than I would be able to get, and for the price, especially. Honestly, until your business is really pretty big, the insurance options in the U.S. are pretty bad, and and especially if you have more complicated, like a family, you got kids and all that, it just really stacks up. Anyway. Yeah, I think that's a huge and not talked about enough secret, maybe, to entrepreneurship is like have a spouse who can.
I think of it as a privilege.
It is.
Like,
It's a huge privilege. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
I think we're afraid of that word because I think people assume it denies challenge or obstacles in your path, and it doesn't. It's just like, hey, you're fortunate in this one regard that you don't have to worry as much as someone else is. And so to me, like having a spouse who has a job that has insurance in the country I'm in is like, that's a privilege that I can then be like, okay, my current income is going to be very variable, but at least I can pursue it and honestly try this as a shot at having a happier and healthier life. Like that's how deeply I'm thinking about this. I'm not just thinking about like, oh, can I make more money? Like I was making plenty. That wasn't the goal. So yeah, I think about it a lot.
Yeah, that's a really good observation. It's kind of similar in the same line of like support around us. And I think this is something that, again, I always like to ask entrepreneurs because I'm always curious how they've done it. But like, what's your support network like? You've got a spouse, so you obviously, they care about you, they support you to some extent at least. And then, who else in your life is a supportive kind of entrepreneurial or a person that you lean on when you've got the hard days or the doubt and all that kind of thing, Kyle?
Well, lucky for me, like my colleague Kyle is like my best friend. Like that's part of why we're doing this. So it's maybe not the wisest thing to go into business with your friend, but on the other hand, it's also really enjoyable. So outside of that, I feel very fortunate over the years to have been able to convert, Twitter friendships into real friendships. And I'm specifically lucky in an entrepreneurial sense that I have a number of friends who have done exactly this, that run software development agencies. Some of them have been doing it almost 20 years. Like they have a load of experience that can be really helpful. Now on the other hand, too, they've been doing it so long, they kind of can't remember what it's like to be at this stage. But
right.
Just in general, being able to be like, hey, I'm struggling with this. What's a strategy I can take? Or even just to be able to shoot like, hey, I have this idea. What am I missing here? Like, what's good and bad about it? I tend to be an idea machine having the ADHD, but like execution can be a different thing, or like not seeing every angle can be a challenging thing. So that's been really useful. I'll call out two specifically that have helped me in that regard. Jamin Holmgren, he's one of the owners of Infinite Red, where they're a React Native agency based. He's in Vancouver, Washington, right across the river from me. I'm in Portland, Oregon. So he's been great. And then Chris Ball is the founder, and I believe his role is, I'm not even going to try. I don't remember what his role is now, of EchoBind. He's based out of Boston. And then, I'm just lucky enough to have a few other like dev friends I've made over the years where one thing that works really well for me is like regularly scheduled chats, because just our things are too busy to really get together. Or in our case, we're all across the country. So every 2 weeks, just get in chatting with them and shooting the breeze or whatever you want to call it, just having catch ups that like give you a chance to have perspective.
I love that. Yeah, I've been a big fan of having some kind of regular group that I'm, meeting with on a recurring basis that I,
I need routine,
can't get out
man.
of. Yeah. Yep. I'm a big believer in that. And I think it does help when you can kind of, I have a few friends that are annual friends. I talk to them once or twice a year. Right. And that's fine. But like, basically all you can do is catch up on surface level stuff when you only get that deep. You can really get deep with somebody when you're meeting with them every 2 weeks, because you're out of surface level stuff to talk about really quick. And then you got to talk about something else. I think that's fantastic and really wise that you've got that. You've been able to, put that group together for yourself. So good for you. couple last questions here for you. Any books you've read in the last couple of years that really influenced you and let's talk specifically around agency and entrepreneurship. I'm sure you've read dev books too. And that's probably, maybe there's some that have some influence on your agency, but any books that have kind of inspired you or influenced your journey thus far?
Ironically, we've already talked about a dev book. I'm just going to mention the title, The Mythical Man Month. Like
Oh
you
yeah.
made brief mention of that.
I still think about that book all the time, even though I don't do dev work.
I think everyone should read it.
Yeah.
Because I've often told people like the solution to problems isn't always more heads. It might just be more time for the existing heads. Heads is such a weird way to speak of people, but
right. Or remove requirements. It's like people hate to do that. Business people do, but I'm like, guys, get it down to the core thing. That's the anyway.
Cut scope. You can ship more scope later. Come on.
Yes. Yep.
I'm trying to think because I mostly listen to a lot of podcasts these days, although that's even changed. Like since the pandemic, I've switched all my podcasts mostly to hobby interests versus like I used to listen to a lot more like nonfiction informational stuff. And I think to some degree, this is also a philosophical change in myself in which, so I'm late diagnosed autistic. I didn't figure it out till the pandemic. And before that, I kind of had this naive belief, and I think actually lots of humans do. We just never put it to words. So forgive me for going a little here, but we have this belief. It's almost like Gnosticism, which was the belief that we could learn secret knowledge to release the spirit from the prison of the body. And I think we're kind of the same way. We read books with this idea that there's going to be some secret knowledge that will unlock this potential of productivity, of growth, of money, of whatever. We're always doing that. And I kind of realized like once I got my diagnosis, I realized like so many of my patterns and my struggles are actually just baked into the neurophysiology of my brain. And it's not something that I am like psychologically flawed with. Like it's not a personality issue. It kind of changed the whole genre for me. Like there's a whole series of books anymore that I'm like, well, that's bullshit. Like it's just denying what we know about neurophysiology, but that's okay. I can't expect everyone to do that. Let's get back on topic. Some good books. I think one in the vein that kind of fits you.
I actually think that's a really interesting point, and I think you're onto something I've noticed too. And I think I don't think I've gotten to the same level as what you're saying there. But what I have noticed a lot is that people tend to want to only read books that confirm things they already believe. Now, maybe this is like a human nature thing. That's it's like we only follow the social media accounts of people we agree with politically or something. The same idea. Kind of hate that about myself and humans. Like, we're basically just looking for confirmation of our own biases that we already had going into it. And so you read a book that you really like, and it really is just because it confirmed your whatever presupposition about a topic. And again, that doesn't mean that there's no value in reading books. I don't think. I think I'm similar in that I still read a couple, what I would call good nonfiction books a year, and I like and talk about with people. But often I try to go outside of my normal scope of knowledge, or a writer who is a little bit of a different background or thought, process than me. So anyway, I'm kind of with you on that. I don't know if I'm 100% there, but I think there's something there.
I agree fully. Like, I think there's plenty of value still out there. And in fact, just the act of reading, whether it's audiobooks or not, is probably a net positive. Like forcing yourself to actually think through things and analyze things is probably beneficial. Like I don't have any studies to quote or anything like that, but that seems like a positive. And, yes, we all pursue confirmation bias a lot. But I don't know that I can really blame people either. So
Right.
I mentioned my previous career, and I promise to keep this tangent as short as I can. But my previous career was in ministry. I was a pastor. I have a master's in theology. And what I really noticed when I was leaving the church and eventually leaving Christianity was, the role of a pastor is not really to be theologically astute or to be theologically challenging. It's mostly just to be a good manager of people. Like, and the truth is, like, most of what they're hearing on a Sunday is not going to really challenge what they already believe about the religion and about their theologies. And at the end of the day, as much as it pains me as someone who like really cares deeply about like veracity and correctness, at the end of the day, I think people just have too much on their plate to really care about being theologically or philosophically astute. And I'm not trying to
Sure.
be mean. Maybe that sounds
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
but
No,
like
I think you're right.
we just have too much to do. Our world, we weren't made for this world. We don't talk about that, but like our brain developed 250,000 years ago to survive nature and basically hang around all day. Like we were leisurely, social, lazy beings, and now we live in this hyper industrialized,
Yeah, very different.
late stage capitalism. We wonder why we have all these problems. It's like, well, you weren't made for this. Sorry. And so when that applies to like how I think about business or how I think about books, like to bring it back, like there's one book that kind of helped my mindset a little bit, which would be The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. Like just my takeaway from it was like, I don't expect Agathist to be here forever. But I'm also not playing like a finite game where I care about stealing everyone's resources. Like, so having the mindset of like, how can I make this sustainable for myself and for the people who work for me or with me? That's on my mind. I keep looking at my books over here. I'm trying to think of others. I've read tons of really great books over the years. One that kind of impacted me that I think is a little different is a book called When by Daniel Pink.
Yeah.
It's a book all about timing. And I think people like really don't understand it, but specifically as it relates to me, like it helped me understand my chronotype better. Like, I'm a bit more of a night owl, but I also recognize like I have like, for whatever reason, I do my very best work first thing in the day. Like I'm not a morning person. I don't get up early, but I get up and I get to my machine as fast as I can, kind of, because I know those key 1 to 3 hours are going to be like the best hours I'm going to have all day. But yeah, I mean, I might have some more, but I can't think of them at the moment. So
That's great, Kyle. I love Infinite Game and Simon Sinek's other stuff too is all really good. It is a little like heady. It's not, business tactic advice stuff, which is, again, like kind of gets into that. Do we really need more of that? Anyway. All right, cool. Thanks for, Kyle. This has been awesome. And I love the diversion into other topics. I'm totally cool with that. Don't, I'll get, I don't want to go too far into philosophy since that's not our primary goal here today. But where can people learn more about you or find out about you or follow up with you if they want to work with Agathist or just talk to you personally about running an agency?
if they want to know about me, KyleShevlin.com is the best place to go. I've been maintaining a blog there for about a decade. I write sporadically, but I try and write really deeper, more conceptual posts about programming. If they want to learn about Agathist, please go to agath.ist. And you can read there. We're starting some blog posts there, doing project recaps. It'd be really exciting for people to check those out and tell us what they think and get in touch with us. Probably the easiest way to get in touch with me is on Twitter. And that's just Kyle Shevlin. That's my name. And my DMs are open. Always happy to try and answer a question or two about this and build some new relationships.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing, Kyle. This has been really fun to get to know you better. And we will have all the links in the show notes below. Thanks so much for listening, everybody. Have a great one.
Thanks, Karl.
Thank you for watching this episode of Retain Trust. If you like this one, give it a thumbs up and subscribe on YouTube. It takes 2 seconds and it helps others find out about the show. And if you have questions or suggestions for a future episode, leave a comment. See you next time.